Listen carefully, because what I'm about to tell you was never meant to reach your ears. In the autumn of 1834, inside a stone convent in Ohio, 12 nuns were found dead, kneeling in prayer, their hands folded, their faces serene, no blood, no wounds, no sign of poison. Doctors swore they were in perfect health, yet every single heart had stopped. It was as if someone or something had simply switched them off. The church tried to bury it. Local newspapers were warned not to print it. Families were silenced with threats and promises of salvation, and the official record reduced to ashes in a parish fire that was called accidental. But secrets like this don't vanish. They echo. They wait for ears willing to hear them. And now it's your turn. This story isn't just about 12 women who died without explanation. It's about power, ancient power, the kind that doesn't scream, it whispers. The kind that doesn't strike, it waits. Institutions call it holy, but those who've glimpsed it know it for what it truly is, a system of control. Because the truth is, the deaths of those 12 nuns were not random. They were not natural. They were a ritual, a demonstration of influence by forces that have been bending humanity for centuries. Governments, churches, monarchies, secret councils, they all drink from the same well. And once you taste its water, your soul is never entirely your own. So before we go further, I'll give you this warning. Once you hear what comes next, you cannot return to ignorance. Knowledge changes a man. It burns through his illusions and leaves him raw, but sharp, awake, alive in ways most never dare to be. If you're ready for that burn, lock yourself in. Subscribe now, because the deeper we go, the more dangerous the truth becomes, and you will not want to lose this trail. And comment below. Right now, tell me where you're watching from. Let me know you've stepped into this shadow with me. This is no story, this is a descent. And it begins in 1834, where 12 bodies knelt in silent prayer, waiting for someone someday to finally speak the truth they died carrying. Picture the convent on the night it happened. The air is damp, heavy with the smell of burning oil lamps and the faint sweetness of autumn leaves outside. The women rise before dawn, as they always do, bound by discipline, bound by vows. They chant prayers in unison, their voices low and steady, an ancient rhythm meant to quiet the flesh and elevate the soul. But on this night, something answers that rhythm, something that does not belong to the God they serve. One nun later described it, before her testimony was erased from parish records, as a humming under the earth, a vibration in the stone walls, so faint it could have been imagined. Yet all 12 turned their heads at once, eyes darting, as though they had heard it too. Not sight, a presence. And then, one by one, the women began to still, not in panic, not in fear, but in a terrifying silence, as if obedience itself had been weaponized against them. By morning, the priest found them, kneeling, faces calm, eyes open, glazed toward heaven, but lifeless. He tried to shake them, call their names, but they were gone, every last one, in perfect health, but utterly extinguished. Why did no one hear of this? Because the institutions that control your reality understand one thing: unexplained death awakens questions, and questions awaken resistance. So the story was scrubbed, folded into whispers, erased by official decree. Those who pushed for answers were branded heretics, conspirators, or simply mad, and society, obedient as ever, moved on. But here's the truth you were never told. This wasn't an isolated event. It was part of a pattern. Across Europe, in monasteries, convents, and isolated chapels, similar incidents appear. Dozens of people found dead in positions of prayer or silence, with no cause that science could name. Always recorded in fragments, always followed by fire, by missing pages, by rewritten ledgers. Coincidence?
No, it was a test.
A ritual rehearsal for psychological control on a scale the world had never seen. Institutions learned something in those nights. They learned how fragile obedience could be, and how easily it could be turned into a weapon. And that weapon has never been laid down. It's been sharpened, perfected, used not only in churches, but in governments, schools, and even the glowing screen in front of you now. The question is, will you notice before it's used against you? When dawn came and the priest realized what lay before him, the panic was instant. Not grief, panic. Because in 1834, a convent wasn't just a house of faith, it was an institutional stronghold. 12 nuns dying without explanation would raise questions the church could not afford. If God's chosen brides could fall without warning, then what did that mean for the flock who trusted him with their souls? So the machinery of suppression clicked into motion. First came the physician, summoned not to find truth, but to write it away. His report stated exhaustion, as if 12 women trained for decades in rigid discipline simply fell asleep and never woke. But eyewitnesses noticed something that didn't fit: bodies unnaturally cold, blood still rich in their veins, skin unmarked by any illness. Death had left them too clean. Then came the clerical decree. The convent was closed to outsiders, windows shuttered, bells silenced. The funeral was rushed under heavy watch, the coffins sealed before families could see what lay inside. Those who asked questions were warned their doubt was sin. To resist the official story meant resisting God himself. And in that era, resisting God was a faster death sentence than disease. But here's what chills me most. The parish records for that year were altered. Not missing, altered. Names scratched out, rewritten. Events shifted by weeks. If you looked only at the official archive, you'd never know 12 women even lived in that convent. The system didn't just erase their deaths, it erased their lives. And this is the trick of every great institution of control. They don't need to destroy you with fire. They only need to adjust the record, rewrite the past, until what you know is quietly replaced with what they want you to believe. Then you begin to question yourself. Did it happen at all? Did you dream it? Memory bends, truth dissolves, and obedience feels safer than doubt. That's the first lesson hidden in the convent of 1834. Erasure is the most powerful weapon. Not bullets, not chains. Erasure. Once history is rewritten, people guard their own ignorance as if it were salvation. The silence surrounding those 12 nuns wasn't an accident. It was a prototype, a test to see how much reality could be hidden in plain sight. And if you think this was just the 1800s, you're not paying attention. The same blueprint is still running today. What happened in that Ohio convent wasn't buried. It was studied. The church wasn't afraid of the mystery. They were fascinated by it. Because in those lifeless bodies, they saw something far more valuable than tragedy. They saw a method, a pattern, a key to shaping obedience without question. The deaths of the 12 nuns became more than a horror. They became a data point, a demonstration of how fragile the human mind is when locked inside ritual, repetition, and silence. The nuns didn't die in chaos. They didn't fight back. They died in absolute discipline. That is what made them useful. That is why their story was hidden but never forgotten. From that moment, the blueprint spread, first in the cloisters of faith. Monks, priests, and convents across Europe and America trained generations in the art of structured submission. Bells told you when to wake, when to eat, when to pray, when to sleep. Every hour dictated, every action measured. This wasn't just devotion. It was conditioning, the shaping of minds to respond not to their own will, but to external command. And once the church perfected it, the state borrowed it. Look at the military. Marching drills, synchronized chants, the stripping away of identity until the soldier becomes a part of the machine. Look at schools. Rows of desks, bells dividing time, tests that measure obedience more than intelligence. Even factories, where whistles replaced prayers and men labored in shifts like monks at prayer. Do you see it yet? The pattern didn't stay behind stone walls. It metastasized into society itself. Every system you know today, religion, politics, labor, even entertainment, feeds on the same structure of control born in those convent walls. Keep people repeating, keep them synchronized, keep them so deeply inside the rhythm that they never stop to ask who set it in motion. And the genius of it, you don't need chains, you don't need violence. People regulate themselves. They wake when told, they work when told, they die when told. All because the pattern feels safe, feels holy, feels normal. The 12 nuns didn't just die. They became the silent architects of a system that spread across nations. A system so invisible you mistake it for reality itself. And if you think this is paranoia, ask yourself, why does every institution you've ever known rely on the same ritual of bells, schedules, and silence? Who taught them that? If it were only psychology, the story would be disturbing enough. But psychology alone cannot explain why the deaths in Ohio echoed almost perfectly with incidents centuries earlier. In France, in Spain, in cloisters no historian dares to discuss, nor can it explain why survivors often spoke of sounds beneath the earth or visions of light that weren't light at all. You see, every ritual has two layers. The outer layer is for the obedient, prayers, chants, bells, schedules, but the inner layer, that's where the real power moves. The part never written, never spoken, the silence, the stillness that opens something in the human mind or maybe in something beyond it. The 12 nuns were trained for silence, hours of it, days of it. Their identities dissolved, their desires stripped away until all that remained was an empty vessel waiting to be filled. And on that night in 1834, something filled them. Something that did not leave them alive. Was it divine? No, divinity gives life. This took life, cleanly, perfectly, without struggle. It left them untouched yet hollow, as though their essence had been claimed, not by disease or accident, but by a force that thrives where obedience is absolute. Institutions have always flirted with that power. They know ritual doesn't just shape behavior. It opens doors. Chant long enough, march long enough, kneel long enough, and you create a rhythm the mind can't escape. But the rhythm doesn't only reshape the human. It invites something else into the room. Something that feeds. This is why monasteries, armies, schools, and parliaments all rely on ritual. Not just to control you, but to align you. To make you resonate like an instrument until you hum at the same frequency. And when you hum at that frequency, you become accessible. Not just to leaders, not just to systems, but to whatever waits in the silence beyond. Those 12 nuns weren't the first to be claimed, and they weren't the last. Their deaths were a sacrifice, not in blood, but in order, in perfect, synchronized devotion. That's what makes it so dangerous, because obedience isn't just submission, it's an offering. And once offered, something always takes it. The question you should ask is not, what killed them? The question is, who benefited from their silence? The convent in 1834 was not an end, it was a beginning, a prototype. What was tested on 12 silent nuns has since been perfected and scaled to billions. You are surrounded by it every day, immersed so deeply that you don't even notice. But once you see it, you can never unsee it. Think about schools. Rows of children seated at identical desks. Eyes forward, bells commanding when to begin, when to stop, when to speak, when to eat. Children don't move to their own rhythm. They move to the institution's rhythm. By the time they graduate, their instincts have been overwritten. They no longer ask, why must I obey? They ask only, what must I obey? Think about the military. Boots hammering pavement in perfect synchronization. Chants shouted until the self dissolves, until the soldier no longer thinks, I, but only we. The rhythm erases doubt, erases individuality, and in that erasure, obedience becomes survival. And what about the media? Every night, millions watch glowing screens at the same hour, listening to the same anchors, the same tones, the same carefully chosen words. Headlines are not news. They are commands, instructions shaping what you fear, what you trust, what you forget. Even the rhythm of entertainment, commercial breaks, theme songs, scripted laughter, was designed to lock your nervous system into repetition. The truth is, this is not just culture, it is conditioning. Rituals modernized, stripped of candles and incense, dressed instead in suits and screens. The hum beneath the earth in that Ohio convent has become the hum of your television, your phone, your endless feed of synchronized distraction. And here's what chills me: obedience, once synchronized, doesn't need enforcement, it sustains itself. People laugh at the same jokes, fear the same enemies, chant the same slogans, wave the same flags, post the same hashtags, all without questioning who gave them the rhythm to follow. This is why the deaths of those 12 nuns mattered. They revealed the template. The template was refined, and now you live inside of it. The walls are not stone, but screens. The bells are not church towers, but notifications. And the silence isn't prayer. It's the quiet acceptance you give every time you obey without asking why. So ask yourself, when you wake, when you work, when you scroll, are you choosing your rhythm? Or are you just another vessel, kneeling in a ritual you don't even realize you've joined? Let's step out of history for a moment. Forget the convent. Forget the nuns. Look at you, right now. Sitting in the glow of this screen, hearing my voice. You think you chose this moment, but did you? Your phone lit up, a notification pulled you in. An algorithm, built on the same psychology first tested in convent walls, delivered this video to your feed. You clicked because something in you was hungry. Hungry for truth, yes, but also trained. Trained to respond to signals you don't control. Do you see it? You live in the same structure they perfected almost 200 years ago. Wake when the alarm rings. Work when the clock says. Obey the signals. Obey the schedules. Even your silence is scripted. On your commute, in your cubicle, in front of your television, you are surrounded by rhythms designed to strip you of choice while making you believe you are free. And when you finally feel restless, when something in you rebels, you are offered distractions. Entertainment, sports, politics, bread and circuses, keeping your body docile while your mind is lulled into ritual. The cycle never ends because it doesn't need to. It sustains itself, like a serpent swallowing its own tail. This is the genius of institutional power. It convinces you the cage is comfort, that the rules are safety, that obedience is peace. Just as the nuns kneeled in silence, believing they were closest to God, you kneel in your own ways, believing you are closest to freedom. But the truth, both were rituals, both were cages, both were designed by hands you will never see. And if you think you're different, if you think your will is stronger, test it. Try breaking rhythm, delete the alarm, leave your phone dark, stop answering the signals for even one day. You'll feel it instantly, the anxiety, the sense that something is wrong, that you are out of sync. That is not your soul speaking. It is your conditioning screaming to pull you back into line. That's how deep the system runs. You don't need chains when your own mind is trained to drag you back into obedience. The convent didn't end in 1834. The convent never ended at all. It only changed its shape. And now the question presses on you: will you remain a vessel for silence, or will you choose to break the rhythm before it consumes you? The convent was small, 12 lives erased in silence. But history shows us what happens when the same rhythm expands beyond stone walls, beyond cloisters, beyond faith. When entire societies fall into step, the result is not just tragedy. It is catastrophe. Take Salem, Massachusetts, 1692, a town where whispers became law. Young girls murmured accusations, ministers repeated them, and soon the entire community moved in perfect rhythm. Fear, confession, condemnation, execution. Neighbor turned on neighbor, families destroyed. 19 hanged, 1 pressed to death under stones, not because of proof, not because of truth, but because the ritual of fear demanded obedience, and the people obeyed. Fast forward to 20th century Europe. Millions marched under banners of swastikas, saluted in unison, chanted slogans until they drowned out thought. Entire nations synchronized, convinced that conformity was strength, that silence was safety. And in that silence, entire populations disappeared. Jews, Romani, dissidents, all erased by the rhythm of obedience. Ordinary men who believed themselves incapable of evil became executioners because the pattern told them it was righteous. Or look east to Soviet Russia. Citizens lived in a system where even silence was suspect. People learned to chant the party line, clap when told, praise leaders they despised. To remain alive meant to align. To resist meant to vanish into gulags, erased from photographs, erased from memory itself. Once again, erasure proved more powerful than bullets. Do you see the pattern now? Salem, Nazi Germany, Stalin's Russia, and yes, the Ohio Convent. Different centuries, different cultures, but the same rhythm, the same mechanism. Conditioned obedience leading to silence, silence leading to death, and death leading to erasure. The most disturbing part: none of these systems needed to convince everyone, only a fraction. Because obedience spreads like fire. Once enough voices align, the rest follow, not out of loyalty, but out of terror of being the one who stands apart. That terror is the true weapon. And here's the bitter truth: you're not safer today. Modern society has simply traded gallows for cancellation, bullets for digital exile, gulags for the silent crushing of reputation. The methods evolve, but the rhythm remains unchanged. The system doesn't need your belief, it only needs your silence. The 12 nuns were a prototype. Salem was a rehearsal. Totalitarian regimes were demonstrations. And now we live inside the perfected system, where obedience is invisible and resistance feels impossible. The question is, will you keep kneeling, or will you finally stand? You've seen how the pattern repeats. Salem, Germany, Russia, the convent. But here's the question no historian dares to ask: why does it repeat with such precision? Why does silence, obedience, and ritual always lead to the same outcome: erasure, death, and control? Is this only human corruption, or is there something deeper feeding on it? Consider this. In almost every account of mass obedience, survivors describe strange phenomena. In Salem, ministers wrote of hearing humming voices in the meeting house before the accusations spread. In Nazi rallies, veterans recalled a trance overtaking the crowd, an electricity in the air that made individuals lose themselves in the sea of salutes. In monasteries across Europe, before sudden mass deaths, scribes wrote of visions, light in the dark that was not light at all. These aren't random hallucinations, they're symptoms. The rhythm of obedience creates a frequency, a resonance that doesn't just shape humans. It calls something else, something that waits in silence, something that doesn't create, but consumes. The nuns of Ohio were vessels. Their silence was not empty, it was filled. Their obedience wasn't loyalty, it was an offering. And when the offering was complete, something claimed them. Cleanly, perfectly, without struggle. What took them left no fingerprints, because it doesn't need fingerprints. It only needs the rhythm. This is why institutions cling so tightly to ritual. It's not just about shaping nations, it's about sustaining a connection. The church calls it holy, armies call it unity, governments call it order. But behind those words hides the same truth. Obedience opens doors, and what walks through those doors is not human. You felt it yourself, even if you never admitted it. That strange pressure in a crowd when thousands chant the same words. That loss of self when music or ritual pulls you into something larger. That flicker of unease when silence feels alive as if it's listening. That isn't imagination. That's the hum beneath the earth. The same hum that took 12 nuns in 1834. So here is the forbidden question: who benefits from your obedience? Not just politicians, not just priests, but what sits behind them, feeding in the shadows, watching how willingly you kneel. If you felt it before, you know exactly what I mean. And if you haven't, keep listening, because before this story ends, you may. The Ohio Convent is remembered, barely, in whispers. But what most don't know is that fragments of its story did survive the fire. Not the official parish reports, those were rewritten. Not the church's archive, those pages were burned. But hidden in private journals, in letters smuggled out before the silence fell, traces remain. And those traces paint a picture far darker than the official line of exhaustion. One journal, written by a young novice who escaped transfer to the convent by mere chance, tells of the sisters speaking of dreams in the weeks before their deaths. Dreams of light pouring through the walls at night, so blinding they woke in tears. Dreams of voices chanting in languages they didn't know, yet somehow understood. She wrote, "They wake trembling, but by dawn they are calm again, almost too calm, as if their fear has been swallowed whole." Another letter, written by the town's physician, before he was pressured into silence, described the bodies as unnatural. He wrote, "Their skin is cold, their eyes open, the pupils dilated. It is not the face of death I have known, it is the face of something taken, as if the soul was emptied, leaving only the vessel." He mailed this privately to a colleague in Cincinnati. The letter survived, hidden in a family chest until discovered decades later. Even the priest, the one who sealed the convent to outsiders, left a clue. In the margins of a ledger, barely visible, he wrote 3 words in Latin: silentium servitor. The silence must be preserved. He knew. He was told to bury it, and he obeyed. But ask yourself, why would so much effort be spent erasing 12 deaths? Why silence families, burn archives, alter timelines? Unless the deaths were not just tragedy, but revelation. Unless they prove something that could never be spoken aloud, that ritual doesn't simply bind men, it opens them. And once opened, they are not always closed again. These scraps of testimony, scattered and half hidden, are not the ramblings of the insane. They are warnings. Warnings that what happened in Ohio was not unique. Warnings that institutions will burn history itself rather than let you see the hand behind the curtain. And the pattern of erasure continues. Even now, in digital archives, stories vanish. Videos are pulled. Accounts silenced. The method hasn't changed. Only the tools have, because the silence must be preserved. Always. Think about this. In 1834, silence was preserved with fire. In 2024, silence is preserved with code. Erasure has gone digital. The same strategy perfected in the convent has been scaled into an invisible architecture that governs the entire modern world. Back then, families were told their daughters died of exhaustion. Now, when something inconvenient surfaces, you're told it's misinformation. Back then, parish ledgers were rewritten by hand. Now, digital archives are altered by algorithms, invisible edits that erase stories from existence while convincing you they were never there to begin with. The method hasn't changed. Only the tools. Scroll your feeds. Do you ever notice how certain topics vanish without explanation? How entire videos, accounts, or books simply stop appearing? That isn't chance. That's the modern convent wall. Your obedience is no longer demanded through bells and prayer. It's enforced through filters, feeds, and deletions so subtle you mistake them for your own choice. This is the perfection of control, making the erasure seamless, invisible. You don't fight what you cannot see. You don't rebel against what you don't know is missing. And in this silence, you don't even realize you've already knelt. Here's the disturbing truth. You've been trained to accept erasure as protection. Protected from harmful speech. Protected from dangerous ideas. Just as the families of those 12 nuns were told their grief was holy, you are told your ignorance is safety. The rhythm repeats, always the same pattern, always the same outcome. And here's where the supernatural undertone seeps back in. Because silence is not neutral, silence is not empty. Silence creates space, and that space always fills. In Ohio, it filled with something that claimed 12 lives. Online, it fills with narratives chosen for you, emotions planted in you, behaviors shaped in you. Your silence is not the absence of power, it is the surrender of it. And when billions kneel in digital silence, perfectly aligned by algorithms and screens, what do you think comes through the door then? What hum begins beneath the earth, waiting for its offering? This is not history repeating. This is history evolving, and you are inside it right now. What happened in Ohio was not new. It was not even Christian. It was ancient. The convent was only the most recent stage for a ritual as old as civilization itself. A ritual built on silence, order, and the offering of life. Look to the Aztecs, who raised temples not only to spill blood but to orchestrate mass silence. Before the blade fell, thousands stood still, heads bowed, bodies aligned in unison. The sacrifice was not the cut, it was the submission. The gods, they believed, fed not on blood alone, but on the rhythm of collective obedience. Look to Greece. At Delphi, priests prepared oracles in dark chambers, fasting and silencing themselves until the trance consumed them. Ancient texts say that Pythia would begin to hum, her voice not her own, words pouring through her as if she had been hollowed out. The silence, the stillness, the rhythm. It was the same pattern. Look to Egypt. Pharaohs demanded ritual processions where thousands walked in perfect cadence, carrying offerings in silence. Walls covered in hieroglyphs show rows of figures, heads bowed, no individuality, only repetition. These were not just ceremonies, they were signals, frequencies carved into the soul of a nation, resonating through stone and sand. And even further back, to Sumer. The earliest clay tablets speak of the binding songs. Chants repeated until worshippers collapsed in exhaustion. The gods of those tablets were not creators, they were feeders. They thrived on ritual silence, on minds emptied of will, on obedience turned into offering. Now look again at Ohio, 1834. 12 nuns trained in silence, emptied of desire, kneeling in unison until something took them. Different religion, same structure, same offering. Do you see it? The pattern crosses millennia, the costumes change, the names of the gods change, but the rhythm does not.
Chant, obey, empty, offer, race.
And here's the truth: no priest, no teacher, no historian dares to admit obedience is not just control, it is currency. A currency traded between men and something older than men. A currency that built temples, raised empires, crowned kings, and claimed lives in convents no history book will ever mention. The deaths of the 12 nuns were not an accident. They were a continuation. Another offering in a chain stretching back to the dawn of civilization. Another proof that when humans kneel, someone or something always collects the silence. Now you understand the pattern. You've seen it stretch from Sumer to Egypt, from Salem to Ohio, from Nazi rallies to glowing screens. Always the same structure, always the same rhythm. Chant, obey, empty, offer, erase. But here is the truth that should haunt you: the pattern only works if you consent to it. It only works if you kneel. The hum beneath the earth has no power until men and women align themselves into silence. Once they do, it feeds. Once they do, it rules. And right now, at this very moment, you are being asked the same question the 12 nuns were asked. Though no priest will say it, no politician will admit it, no leader will name it aloud. The question is simple. Will you live as a vessel, or will you claim yourself back? Because once you see the system, you are no longer innocent. Ignorance was your cage, but now that cage is gone. And in its place is choice, a dangerous choice. Because to stand apart is to be hunted. To resist the rhythm is to feel its weight pressed down on you, demanding you return. But to resist is also the only way to live as more than a vessel. If you're still here, still listening, then you've already felt the shift inside. You're no longer just a watcher of history. You're standing inside it. And I want you to prove it, not for me, but for yourself. In the comments, write the phrase, "I will not kneel." Write it twice, not once, twice. Because the first time you write it, the old conditioning will resist, whispering you don't need to, that it doesn't matter. But the second time breaks the rhythm. The second time seals it. This isn't just engagement. This is initiation, a symbolic act to lock in your refusal to be erased, your refusal to be consumed. A digital scar on the system itself that says you saw the truth and you chose to stand. I will not kneel. Twice. That's how you step out of the silence. That's how you break the rhythm. That's how you mark yourself as one who knows. And once you know, nothing can ever make you forget again. There are only two paths, and history has carved them both in blood. The first is the path of kneeling. It feels safe, it feels easy, it feels like belonging. You kneel, you obey, and the hum accepts you. You dissolve into the rhythm, into the collective silence, until your name, your will, your fire vanish. Those who kneel do not even know they've been erased. They call it peace or order or faith. But their lives are consumed, their essence traded as currency in a system that has been feeding for thousands of years. The second path is the refusal, the defiance. To stand when the crowd bows, to speak when silence is demanded, to guard the last spark of your will when everything around you whispers to give it away. Those who refuse will suffer. They will be mocked. They will be hunted. They will be cast out, but they will remain human. And when the hum demands its offering, they will not be food. This has always been the test. From the priests of Sumer to the pharaohs of Egypt, from the rituals of Delphi to the quiet halls of that Ohio convent, the system whispers the same invitation: kneel and be safe. Stand and be marked. And the few who stand change everything. They do not become martyrs of silence. They become breakers of rhythm, men who force history onto new paths. The ones who refuse to kneel are the reason the system must keep rewriting, keep erasing, keep hiding the evidence. Because one act of defiance, one refusal, can ripple forward for centuries. When you look at the faces of the 12 nuns, you should feel a chill not only at their death, but at the thought of what their silence fed, what it strengthened. And when you look in the mirror tonight, you must decide, will your face belong to the kneeling or to the standing? The hum is still waiting. The system is still feeding. And every man who lives in ignorance becomes part of its offering. But every man who refuses, who declares, I will not kneel, becomes something else entirely, something dangerous. A living crack in the silence. The convent in Ohio was buried, the records sealed, the graves unmarked. And yet, the silence of those 12 women still echoes, vibrating beneath the surface of our world like a warning bell muffled under centuries of soil. You were never meant to hear it. You were never meant to trace the pattern across civilizations, to see the hum that binds kings, priests, and governments into one ancient design. They rely on your blindness. They rely on your obedience. They rely on you kneeling without ever realizing you've bent. But now you know, and knowledge is dangerous, because once a man sees the architecture of control, he can never again move through life as an innocent vessel. Every ritual, every command, every demand for silence will carry a different weight. You will hear the hum beneath the surface, the pull of the rhythm, the invitation to dissolve yourself into obedience. And you will remember this night, this voice, this choice. The world is not safe. It never was. But the true danger is not outside. It is within the decision you will make when the moment comes. When the crowd bows, will you kneel beside them, comforted by their company? Or will you stand alone but awake, bearing the fire that cannot be traded, cannot be erased, cannot be consumed? Mark this moment, because it will return. In a boardroom, in a courtroom, in a church pew. In the quiet of your own mind, the hum will whisper. The rhythm will call, and you will decide who you are. The 12 nuns made their offering, and the world forgot. But you are not forgotten. You are watching because you were meant to. You are hearing this because something inside you demanded it. That spark is alive. Do not let it go dark. Subscribe now, because the descent does not end here. This is only the beginning. And in the comments, tell me where you're watching from, so I know how far this awakening has reached. How many sparks are burning across the map of silence? Remember this truth and let it carve itself into your bones. The system survives on obedience. The silence survives on kneeling. But if you choose, will not kneel.